So according to Book Riot, documents in a major copyright suit against Meta. So this is a story we covered several episodes back. Meta has Llama is their AI model, their large language model. It's not a very good model. Nobody really uses it. But they have like 7 million pirated books that are part of the model. And the reason why people know that it has pirated books is because it's an open source model. So the other models probably have pirated books as well, or they got their books from a library. But because those models are not open source, it's harder to catch them in the act, so to speak. So Meta is the one taking arrows for this activity. And they revealed that while the tech giant determined that the books were essential for building their data models, their defense also hinges on the argument that the individual books themselves are essentially worthless. That is, any one book's presence in or absence from the model is inconsequential. But the aggregate value of thousands of books, really it's millions of books, of Meta allegedly pirated to train its LLMs is immense and irreplaceable. You can't make the whole without the parts, but since the parts are apparently interchangeable, Meta doesn't think it should have to pay for any of them. So this is kind of like saying every single grain of sand is worthless, therefore the beach is worthless. And that's an interesting argument, especially since they're trying to kind of launder that argument through the fair use doctrine. What I anticipate long term with this debate overall, and Meta's kind of the first court case out of the gate, is that eventually there's going to be some sort of system where authors can either opt out of having their book included in large language models or opt in to having their book included in large language models. And I should say copyright holders really will probably be the ones to make the decision. And because the individual books are worthless from a LLM perspective, my anticipation is, or what I anticipate is that 90% of authors will just do the default because it doesn't really matter on an individual book basis. The hassle of taking any action at all is more than the benefit or the cost, which means if you have to opt out of having your book included in the large language model, which is most likely what's going to happen. That's what OpenAI is doing with celebrities not wanting their likenesses included in the image engine. They have to actually reach out and take action to opt out of being in the image engine. It's very likely going to be the same system. It'll be certainly what the AI companies lobby for and argue for. 90% of authors or copyright holders will take no action and their books will stay in the models. If you, on the other hand, if you have to take action to be included in the large language models, I think 90%, maybe 99% of authors will take no action and not be included. And part of what leads me to predict this is that this is true with major decisions in life, like organ harvesting. So there's a famous study, or I think it was a natural experiment, actually. I think it was between Germany and Austria. So Germany and Austria, they both speak German. They both have very similar cultures. It's basically the same people in both countries. And one country had something like 90%, 80 to 90% of people were registered to be organ donors. And the other country had only 10 or 20% registered to be organ donors. And so initially you're like, oh, well, Germans are much more generous and compassionate than Austrians, or vice versa. But what it turned out to be was that the DMV form was worded differently. And in one country, you had to check the box to opt out. And in the other country, you had to check the box to opt in. And that tiny amount of work to check the box was too much hassle for 90% of the Germanic people to take. And so controlling the defaults is everything. There's a saying in Silicon Valley that the devil is in the defaults. And almost everyone goes with the recommended button. So if you give them buttons on a wizard, one says recommended, one doesn't, they're going to check the recommended one and click next, regardless of what that button represents. And that's what's going to happen here. Now, what will be interesting is if you have to opt in to be included, there will be huge marketing advantages to having the AI familiar with your book, right? If I'm talking with GPT or with Grok and I'm asking for it to recommend a fantasy book to me, it's going to recommend fantasy books that it's familiar with. And so it having ingested your book makes it much more likely to recommend your book. And so the search engine optimization of the 21st century, the later half of the 21st century, is going to be all about getting AIs to recommend your book and to recommend you. And I was actually just testing this. I asked one of the models, I think it was GPT or Grok, who are the top book marketing experts? And it listed a bunch of people. And then I was like, who are the top novel marketing experts? And it mentioned me as a novel marketing expert, but it didn't mention me as a book marketing expert. I'm like, this is where SEO is going, right? Because my brand is very much oriented around the phrase novel marketing, and not as much around book marketing. And so the AI is recommending me for one and not the other. And so PJ is saying, now we have to market our books to AI. It's not that you're marketing your books to AI, it's that you're helping AI market your book for you. And not just marketing your book, but also helping people put together discussion questions for your book. And sometimes somebody will have read a book and they want to talk to somebody about it, and none of their friends have read the book, and so maybe they want to talk to GPT or Aria about your book. Jay Baker says, personally, I think the main problem is more how they acquired the material, i.e. from sites that pirated the material versus paid for a copy. Yeah, that's part of it. And I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding, it's not actually illegal to download pirated content. The law-breaking act is the sharing of the pirated content. So back when the music industry was suing people for using Napster, they weren't suing people for downloading from Napster, although that's what the media made it sound like. Media companies often were owned by the same companies that were doing the lawsuits or part of the same conglomerations. Who they were actually sharing were people who were offering MP3s up to download for others. And while in the court of public opinion, it doesn't really matter downloading or sharing, it does matter in court, if I'm not mistaken about that. And Jay is like, well, if you factor in SEO, we're already kind of doing that. And that's true. Search engine we've already, AI in some perspectives is new, and in others it's not new at all. So the Google search engine has always been AI, right? That's an algorithm. The AI phrase people use to describe a whole suite of technologies, many of which are not at all new. So anytime you hear somebody talking about an algorithm, that's AI. So the Facebook algorithm, it's an AI. It's a little Facebook daemon recommending a different video for you every time you scroll up on Reels or Instagram or what have you. And I think people are going to follow the defaults, and it will be up to people like me if they have to opt in to explain why that might be beneficial and why uploading your book to AI is actually going to help you sell more copies to humans. But it will be interesting if the big corpus of copyrighted books are taken out. It will mean that the only books that AI has access to are whoever's opted in, which will be a tiny fraction, and all the public domain books. And what will happen if that happens, and why I don't think it will happen, because the powers that be don't want this to happen, is that AI is going to get way more conservative, because all the new, more left-leaning books won't be a part of the model, and way more religious, because the percentage of books that were religious in the 1800s, 1700s was a much higher percentage of books than books that are religious now.